The air in Ethan's office was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, sharp against my tired eyes. "You're slowing us down, Callahan," he said, leaning back in his chair. His voice carried that young man's confidence, all suits and spreadsheets. 20 years at the factory, and it ended here. I nodded, my throat tight, hands still in my pockets. No use arguing with a man who'd never touched a steel press. I walked back to my desk, the factory's hum fading behind me. My boots scuffed the worn linoleum, each step heavy. The cardboard box waited plain and empty on my chair. I lifted the photo of Sarah, first her 6-year-old grin frozen in time. My old watch, scratched from years of shift work, went in next. A safety manual, dog-eared, joined them, its pages soft from use. The box was too light for a life's work. "Robert, I'm so sorry," Jenny from accounting whispered, passing by. Her eyes darted away like grief was contagious. I managed a shrug. "It's just business." But it wasn't. Not to me. The drive home blurred through Pittsburgh's gray October streets. Leaves swirled in the wind, catching on my windshield. Squirrel Hill's familiar houses came into view, their porches lit early. I parked the box on the passenger seat, staring back. What do you say to a life packed in cardboard? Ellen was in the kitchen, the scent of pumpkin pie filling the air. The oven hummed softly, a warm contrast to the factory's cold. She turned, wiping flour from her hands, her apron dusted white. "You're home early," she said, then saw my face. Her smile faded. "Oh, Robert, what happened?" I set the box on the counter, its edges worn from my grip. "Ethan fired me," I said, voice low. "Called me outdated, gave me 2 weeks' pay." Ellen's hand found mine, her fingers warm and steady. "You gave them everything," she whispered. Her eyes searched mine, holding years of shared mornings. I sank into a chair, the wood creaking under me. The wedding photo on the wall caught my eye, faded but proud. Ellen and I, young and laughing, 25 years ago. Now my hands felt empty, without a wrench or a clipboard. "Did I fail them, Ellen?" I asked, barely audible. She shook her head. "You kept them safe. That's no failure." The doorbell chimed, soft but sharp in the quiet. Mary, our neighbor, stood there, her gray curls tucked under a scarf. "Brought cookies," she said, holding out a tin. Her eyes lingered on the box. "Heard about the factory." I took the tin, its metal cool in my hands. "Lost my nursing job years ago," she said, voice soft. "They called me too old. But you keep going, Robert." Sarah's voice came from the stairs, light but hesitant. "Dad, you okay?" she asked, her hair tied back, eyes wide. She was 20 now, my little girl grown. I forced a smile. "Just a rough day, kiddo." She nodded, but her frown stayed. Ellen poured coffee, the chip mug warm in my palms. The kitchen clock ticked steady, marking time I didn't know how to fill. 20 years of alarm shifts and safety checks gone. I traced the mug's crack, remembering mornings before dawn. Grace grows in quiet moments, not in applause. But what grace was there in this? The porch called me as evening settled, the air cool and sharp. I sat in the old chair, its wood smoothed by years. The box rested by my feet, a shadow in the fading light. Streetlights flickered on, casting soft glows on the sidewalk. I thought of the factory, its machines still running without me. Had I been erased like a name scratched off a list? Ellen joined me, her shawl wrapped tight. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice a lifeline. I nodded, but my heart wasn't sure. Sarah's drawing taped to the fridge flashed in my mind. A stick figure family drawn in crayon, full of hope. What did hope look like now? The wind carried the scent of leaves, crisp and fleeting. Mary's words echoed. "You keep going. But where, how would you let them erase your life's work? Or would you find a way to fight back? If this story stirred something in you, share it below." The Strip District Market buzzed under a gray November sky. Stalls overflowed with apples, bread, and fish, their scents mingling. My old canvas bag swung heavy, brushing my wool coat. Thanksgiving was close, and Pittsburgh's streets pulsed with shoppers. I hadn't slept well since Ethan's words cut me down. Machines groaned in my dreams, crying out for care. Had I let them erase me, or was there a fight left? I wove through the crowd, my boots scuffing wet pavement. Coffee's bitter warmth drifted from a nearby cart. "Robert," a voice called low and urgent. John Baxter stood by the bread stall, his cap pulled low. His eyes darted like a man hiding from trouble. "Got something for you," he muttered, slipping me a USB drive. "Ethan's faking maintenance logs. It's bad." My fingers closed around the drive, cool and small. Since when, I asked, voice steady despite my racing heart. Months, John said, glancing over his shoulder. They're skipping safety checks to save cash. I nodded, tucking the drive into my pocket. Thanks, John. Keep your head down. He gave a tight smile and vanished into the market's hum. Back home, the kitchen was quiet, Ellen's pie now cooling. I sat at the table, my old laptop humming to life. Its screen glowed dim under the single bulb above. The USB drive clicked into place, a soft sound in the silence. Files opened rows of logs, dates and lies. Skipped checks on the presses, ignored leaks, worn belts unchanged. My stomach turned. Lives were at stake. Ellen appeared, her apron gone, hair tucked behind her ears. What's that? She asked, nodding at the screen. Proof, I said, my voice low. Ethan's cutting corners. She pulled a chair close, its legs scraping the floor. This could ruin us, Robert, she said, eyes wide. Her hand rested on my arm, warm but trembling. I can't let them hurt anyone, I replied, staring at the numbers. I poured tea, the kettle's steam curling in the cool air. The mug warmed my hands, its chipped edge familiar. Years of mornings flashed by, Ellen's coffee, Sarah's laughter. Now this drive held a choice I couldn't ignore. The factory wasn't just steel and bolts. It was people. John. Kids like Sarah. I sipped the tea, its bitterness grounding me. The living room clock ticked steady as always. I moved to the couch, the canvas bag at my feet. Its frayed straps reminded me of market days long past. Ellen joined me, her shawl draped over her shoulders. What's next? She asked, voice soft but firm. I don't know yet, I admitted, my thumb tracing the mug, but my heart whispered fight. Mary's cookies sat on the coffee table untouched. Her words from last week echoed, "You keep going." I thought of the factory's hum, its rhythm, my life's pulse. Ethan thought he'd silenced it, silenced me. But cracks were forming, not just in the machines, in his plan, in his arrogance. Could I widen them without breaking everything? Sarah's footsteps creaked on the stairs, light and quick. Dad, you're still up? She asked, pausing in the doorway. Her sweater was too big, one of Ellen's old ones. Just thinking, I said, managing a small smile. She nodded, her eyes catching the laptop's glow. Be careful, okay, she said, then slipped back upstairs. I leaned back, the couch's worn fabric soft against my coat. The market's bustle lingered in my mind, its energy restless. The USB drive sat on the table, a tiny weight heavy with truth. Sometimes courage waits in the smallest things. A word, a choice, a step. But what step came next? The wind outside rattled the windows, cold and sharp. I pulled Ellen's shawl from the couch, draping it over my knees. The factory's machines called to me even now. Would you stay silent knowing lives were at risk, or would you risk everything for justice? If this stirs, you share your story below. Snow fell softly in Shenley Park, dusting the bare trees. The air was sharp, stinging my cheeks as I walked. My parka's hood trapped warmth, but my hands stayed cold. A portable radio in my pocket played Bing Crosby low. Christmas was near, and Pittsburgh glowed with distant lights. The USB drive weighed heavy in my coat, its truth burning. Could I stay silent when lives hung in the balance? The park was quiet, save for the crunch of snow underfoot. Street lamps cast soft halos, their glow blurred by flurries. I'd come here to think, to escape the factory's ghosts. John's call this morning had shaken me to my core. A kid's hand got crushed, he'd said, voice tight. Ethan blamed the boy, not his skipped safety checks. My stomach churned, picturing blood on the factory floor. I stopped by a bench, brushing snow from its slats. The wood was icy rough against my gloved fingers. I sat, the radio's hum a faint comfort in the cold. The kid was 19, John said, just starting out. I'd trained boys like him, taught them to respect the machines. Now Ethan's lies had cost one, his future. How many more would pay for his greed? Footsteps crunched behind me, slow and deliberate. Mary, our neighbor, appeared, her scarf wrapped tight. Mind if I join you? She asked, her breath clouding. I nodded, scooting over. Her coat rustled as she sat. Rough day, she said, her gray curls catching snowflakes. You could say that, I replied, staring at the ground. She waited, her silence warm, inviting me to speak. A worker got hurt, I said finally, voice low. Ethan's fault, but he's dodging it. Mary's eyes narrowed sharp despite her age. Lost my nursing job for speaking up once, she said. They called me trouble, but I fought quietly. Her words landed like snow, soft but heavy. That's real power, Robert. The kind that lasts. I pulled the radio from my pocket, its static crackling. Bing's voice sang of dreams faint but clear. The cold seeped through my gloves, numbing my fingers. Mary's story stirred something, a spark I'd nearly lost. I can't let them destroy what I built, I said. She smiled, small but sure. Then don't. Back home, the kitchen was warm, Ellen's tea kettle whistling. I hung my parka, snow melting into puddles on the floor. Sarah sat at the table, her sweater loose, eyes curious. Dad, why fight? She asked, her voice soft. She'd overheard Ellen and me last night, my worries spilling. I pulled a chair, its legs scraping, and sat close. Because it's not just me, I said. It's everyone. Ellen handed me a mug, steam curling like morning mist. The tea's warmth spread through my palms, grounding me. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, its wool familiar. Sarah leaned forward, her hair catching the lamplight. What if you lose? She asked, brow furrowed. Then I lose trying, I said, meeting her gaze. Her nod was small, but it felt like trust. The living room clock ticked steady in the quiet. I moved to the couch, the blanket still draped over me. The USB drive rested on the table, glinting faintly. John's warning echoed Ethan's, covering his tracks. The kid's scream, imagined but real, haunted my thoughts. I'd kept that factory safe for 20 years. Now it was breaking, and I couldn't turn away. Ellen joined me, her hand brushing mine. You're doing the right thing, she said, voice firm. I looked at the wedding photo above the mantel, our younger selves. We'd built a life on promises kept, not broken. The truth is heavier than steel, but it holds fast. Could I carry it without breaking too? The snow outside thickened, muffling the world beyond. Christmas lights twinkled through the window, soft and distant. The radio's song faded, leaving only static's hum. Can one man stop a disaster alone? Or is it already too late? If this moves you, share your story below. Snow piled high outside my home office window, January's chill seeping through. The old radio hummed its static, weaving through soft jazz. My desk lamp cast a warm pool over scattered papers. The USB drive sat beside my mug, its truth a quiet fire. Could one man stop a disaster? I decided to try. The factory's ghost demanded it. I sipped tea, its steam curling in the dim light. The mug's chipped rim pressed against my lips, familiar. Ellen's footsteps creaked on the hardwood, soft but steady. She leaned in the doorway, her shawl loose over her shoulders. Still awake, she asked, her voice a gentle anchor. Writing emails, I said, my fingers pausing on the keyboard. The screen glowed with words I'd rewritten a dozen times. I'd spent days crafting the message to the safety board. Dates, logs, skipped checks, each fact a brick in my case. Another email to the factory's directors waited in drafts. No accusations, just evidence, cold and clear. They'll listen, Ellen said, reading my thoughts. Her hand rested on my shoulder, warm through my flannel. You're doing right, Robert. The radio crackled, a news bulletin cutting through jazz. Pittsburgh's winter storms, it warned, would worsen. I glanced at the USB, its plastic glinting under the lamp. John had called again, his voice low, urgent. Ethan's covering tracks, he'd said. Shredding papers. My jaw tightened, but my hand stayed steady. He wouldn't bury this. Not yet. I hit send on the safety board email, heart pounding. The director's message followed, a second, weight lifted. No turning back now. The snow outside swirled, muffling the world's hum. I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight. 20 years of safety protocols reduced to a single drive. Had I done enough to save them? The phone rang sharp in the quiet. John's number flashed on the screen. Robert, they know, he said, words rushed. Ethan's furious. He's asking who talked. I gripped the receiver, its wood smooth from years. Stay out of it, John, I said firmly. He sighed heavy. Be careful, okay? Ellen sat across from me, her mug steaming too. What now? She asked, her eyes searching mine. We wait, I said, setting the phone down. But waiting felt like standing on a cracking ledge. The factory's hum, once my rhythm, now felt distant. I pulled a blanket over my knees, its wool soft. The truth was out, but would it land? Morning brought a call from the factory's HR, unexpected. Mr. Callahan, we'd like you to consult a woman, said. Her voice was crisp, professional, offering money a title. I stared at the wedding photo on my desk, our smiles young. No, I said, calm but firm. I'm done with them. The line went quiet, then clicked off. Sarah appeared, her scarf dangling, ready for work. "Dad, you look tired," she said, pausing by the door. Her eyes flicked to the USB, curious but gentle. "Big decisions," I said, managing a smile. She nodded, her braids swaying as she left. Her trust in me felt like a fragile gift. I couldn't let it break. The radio played on its jazz, now a slow waltz. I opened the album on my desk pages, brittle. Photos of Sarah's first steps. Ellen's garden, our old summers. Each memory a thread woven into this moment. The truth builds bridges, not walls, if you let it. But Ethan's world was closing in. I moved to the living room, the blanket still draped. Snow tapped the windows, a soft, relentless rhythm. The USB sat on the coffee table, a silent witness. Mary's words lingered. Fight quietly. That's power. I'd sent my evidence, but would they act? Or would they bury my truth under their lies? If this speaks to you, share your story below. Rain tapped the factory's roof, a steady drum in the March morning. The air smelled of wet asphalt and oil, sharp and familiar. I stood outside, my coat heavy with damp boots scuffed. The safety board's van pulled up its tires, crunching gravel. Would they bury my truth today? I'd find out. The factory's hum called me back one last time. Inside, the machines groaned, their rhythm off, unsteady. Fluorescent lights buzzed, casting shadows on the steel presses. John met me near the entrance, his cap twisted in his hands. "They're here," he whispered, eyes darting to the inspectors. 3 men in hard hats moved through, clipboards in hand. Ethan stood by his office, his tie loose, face pale. He hadn't expected this. I stayed back, my breath catching in the cold air. The inspectors checked logs, traced pipes, tested switches. One knelt by the press that crushed the kid's hand. "Maintenance records," he called, voice sharp. Ethan fumbled, papers slipping from his hands. John glanced at me, his nod small but sure. The rain grew heavier, rattling the high windows. I leaned against a pillar, its a steel cold through my coat. Memories flooded back, 20 years of safety checks. I'd walk these floors at dawn, coffee in hand. Each bolt, each lever, a promise kept. Now those promises were breaking, but not by me. An inspector approached Ethan. His clipboard marked red. "Skip checks, worn belts, faulty guards," he said, loud enough. Ethan's voice rose thin and defensive. "That's not my fault." The inspector's eyes narrowed. Whose then? Ethan's gaze flicked to me, sharp as a blade. I met it, steady, my hands in my pockets. John edged closer, his voice low. "You did it, Robert." I shook my head. "Not yet." The inspectors moved to Ethan's office, papers in tow. Workers paused, their whispers filling the air like static. The factory felt alive, its pulse quickening. I thought of the kid, 19, his hand gone. This was for him, for all of them. The head inspector emerged, his face grim. "You're done, Mitchell," he said, voice flat. Ethan's shoulders slumped, his bluster gone. "Pack your desk," the inspector added, turning away. Ethan's eyes found mine again, but I looked past him. The machines kept humming, indifferent to his fall. John clapped my shoulder, his grip warm. "They're safe now," he said, a smile breaking through. I nodded, but my chest felt heavy, not light. Justice wasn't loud or sweet, it was cold like rain. I walked the floor, my boots echoing on the steel grates. The workers' eyes followed, some nodding, some silent. I'd given them back their safety, but what next? Outside, the rain slowed, leaving puddles that reflected gray sky. I sat in my truck, the engine warm, radio soft. A jazz tune played its notes, weaving through my thoughts. The USB drive was still in my pocket now, just plastic. Its truth had done its work, but mine wasn't finished. Ellen's voice echoed, "You're doing right." Was I? Sarah's drawing, taped to our fridge, flashed in my mind. Her stick figures, our family drawn in hope. I'd fought for them, for John, for the kid. But the factory wasn't home anymore. My office, my desk, my life there, gone. Could I rebuild something new from this? The radio faded to static, then a weather report. Spring's warmth was coming, it said, slow but sure. I gripped the steering wheel, its leather worn smooth. The wedding photo on my old desk felt far away. Justice carves a path, but it doesn't light the way. What could I build after this reckoning? Could I rebuild after justice? If this moves you, share your story below. Summer's warmth settled over Squirrel Hill, soft and golden. Lilac scented the breeze drifting across my porch. I sat in the old chair, its wood smoothed by years. An album lay open on my lap, pages brittle but loved. Could I rebuild after justice I had? Something new was growing stronger than before. The factory was a memory, now its hum faded. Ethan was gone, his desk empty, his lies exposed. John had called last week, voice lighter. New boss fixed the presses, he said. Thanks to you. I smiled, picturing the kid with the injured hand healing. The safety I'd fought for held fast. But my fight wasn't over, it had changed. My consultancy sign hung on the garage, freshly painted. Callahan's Safety Solutions. It read simple but proud. Clients called daily factories needing my 20 years wisdom. I worked from the dining table, papers spread wide. The coffee mug chipped, but loyal sat close. Ellen's laughter drifted from the kitchen, warm and familiar. This was home, not steel and bolts. Sarah stepped onto the porch, her notebook in hand. Dad, show me the safety protocols again, she asked. Her braids swung, her eyes bright with purpose. I opened the album, pointing to a faded photo. Started with this, I said, tracing a factory shot. She leaned in, learning my trade, my legacy. Her future would carry it forward. Mary walked by, her scarf bright against the summer green. Looking good, Robert, she called, waving a cookie tin. She'd stopped by yesterday, sharing her own story again. Quiet fights win, she'd said, her smile deep. I nodded, the tin now on my table, half empty. Her words were a thread woven into my days. They reminded me why I'd stood up. Ellen joined us, a pitcher of iced tea in hand. The glasses clinked cool against the warm air. Proud of you, she said, her hand brushing mine. Her shawl draped on the chair fluttered in the breeze. I looked at the album, Sarah's First Steps Are Summers. Those moments held me when the factory didn't. They were my strength, my foundation. The radio inside played soft jazz, its notes drifting out. Pittsburgh's skyline glowed in the distance, soft at dusk. I closed the album, its cover worn but whole. The consultancy wasn't just work, it was purpose. Sarah's questions, Ellen's trust. Mary's nod, they mattered. I'd built something new, not for Ethan's world, for mine, for them. Sarah scribbled notes, her pen scratching the page. What's next, she asked, looking up eager. Teaching others, I said, my voice steady. The factory had been one chapter, not the book. Each safety plan I wrote now saved lives. Each lesson I shared with Sarah built tomorrow. Could I keep going even after this? The sun dipped low, painting the porch in gold. Lilac petals fell scattering like quiet promises. I sipped the tea, its sweetness lingering. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's the courage to start again after 50. What legacy would you build if given the chance? Share your story below if this moved you. The evening settled warm and still. Sarah's notebook closed, her smile mirroring Ellen's. The album rested on the table, a life held gently. I'd been abandoned, yes, but I hadn't stayed there. Justice was my path, legacy, my destination. The lilac breeze carried hope, soft but sure. I was home, and that was enough.